Oh, Dog Nation, we are feeling pretty good today. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs. My name is Brandon Adams, and we are celebrating the fact I pulled out an old school T-shirt last week. It seemed to work pretty well. I figured I'll pull out one here again today. The Own the East T-shirt in the honor of the fact the Dogs have now done it 3 years in a row, beating Auburn on the road on Saturday, disappointing Florida and its coach Dan Mullen and kind of everything else in between. We are going to touch and cover all of those bases over the course of our time here together today. John Stinchcomb will come in and be a part of the program as well. I'll get into some of the more serious aspects of the game with him in terms of what you saw from the Georgia defense late with a little bit of an Auburn comeback, what you saw from the Georgia offense for the entirety of the game. Pretty good in a couple of red zone opportunities, one big explosive play, and then maybe not quite so much in the rest of the game. So we'll deal with some of the serious aspects of the game with him. We'll obviously touch on the Tua Tagovailoa injury and kind of outside the boundaries of Dog Nation here. But for the most part, today it's about having fun. Dogs own the East again. They beat up on Auburn for, the 12th time in the last 15 years. An amazing run of dominance here in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. So let's celebrate a little bit today, and glad to have you with us as Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Georgia United Credit Union. Show your team pride with the Georgia Bulldogs debit card. Check out gucu.org/GoDogs for more details.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You know, in life, I try to be a good person, but I've sort of given up on the idea of being a perfect person. What that means specifically, at least in this instance, is, I, for the most part, use PG language. I don't really say anything to anyone that I wouldn't want my kids to hear me say, and you can kind of, if you're ever around me, you kind of notice that, and maybe those of you who listen every day, despite the fact this is a broadcast where we try to keep sort of a certain broadcast standard and norm, it's probably fairly easy to listen in and know that, for the most part, I keep the language pretty clean. I'm a little bit more of a Jerry Seinfeld than I would be, say, a Chris Rock or a fill in the blank with your favorite comedian. That's just kind of a little bit more of the direction I would go in. So that's an example of me, at least to my definition, trying to be a good person. But here's where I fall far short of perfection. While I use clean language and while I use, for the most part, PG vernacular, I'm sometimes entertained when other people don't, whether that be on television or whether that be in person. And I guess Saturday was kind of a combination of the both. At the end of the game, when Georgia beat Auburn, when it owned the SEC East for a third consecutive year, and yes, for those of you watching on video, you see me wearing my Own the East t-shirt. For those of you listening radio and podcast, you should be well aware that's indeed what I'm doing, celebrating the fact that the Dogs won the division again on Saturday. Kirby Smart was asked locker room post-game what his message was to the team. Do you celebrate the fact that you won the SEC East? Is this the kind of thing that you talk about? And by now, I think you're probably well aware of what Kirby Smart said. This is obviously edited for public consumption for a family broadcast, which is what we try to be. But admittedly, when Smart said this, I was one of the people in the post-game press conference laughing. Here is Kirby Smart with a very colorful description of his happiness on Saturday night. Here's Kirby.
I don't think so. I don't even think I said anything about it. I mean, I gave credit to Auburn and told our guys to handle it with you the right way. Told them, how about them dogs? That's what I told them. But excuse my language. But I didn't say anything about the SEC East because that wasn't the goal coming in here. You know what I mean? The goal for us was to continue to get better, grow, play in a tough environment. But it really wasn't about the SEC East. Now, that's a hell of an accomplishment, and I'm proud of our guys, but that's not what it's about.
So in addition to being just kind of funny and the kind of thing you typically don't hear a coach say in a press conference, especially someone like Kirby, who's typically really, really buttoned up and just trying to get through these things, it seems to be a laborious chore for him most of the time. I think there's also some meaning behind what Kirby did. I'll get into kind of some of this here now, but let me kind of start with, I guess, a little bit of a comparison. I mean, first and foremost, I think the reason why Kirby said what he said, and I do believe it was an intentional move, I think he kind of planned on doing something like this. To me, it's a little bit like what happened with Ed Orgeron after LSU beat Alabama last Saturday. And Orgeron's particular moment kind of came from the locker room, whereas Kirby knew he had microphones on him. We were led to believe a week ago that Orgeron didn't know he was being recorded, allegedly. I said at the time last week, and for those of you who are regular listeners or viewers to our program, DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union, you heard me a week ago say that I believe what came out of the LSU locker room was a high-sanction leak. I believe it was Ed Orgeron trying to declare war on the Alabama program and kind of setting himself up as the alpha in comparison to what I think of as a much feeble, frail-looking Nick Saban, at least in comparison to the muscular and, frankly, a pretty manly alpha dude, which is Ed Orgeron. And I thought that what Kirby did on Saturday was also an attempt to kind of step in that same arena. As a way of kind of giving a little context, here is once again also a very heavily edited clip of Ed Orgeron being caught on camera celebrating the LSU win against Alabama last week. Take a listen to this.
We're going to beat down in recruiting. We're going to beat every time they see us.
Okay.
You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Roll Tide, what?
So listen, here's the thing. I don't talk that way at the dinner table. I don't talk that way in business meetings, but football is just a different kind of life here. Football is one of those things where I don't care if you embrace this aspect of it or if you try to pretend it doesn't exist, but there is just something to be said that football games are won by the stronger team. And oftentimes the stronger team is led by the stronger coach. This is just sort of like an alpha type thing. This is just kind of the thing where speaking with a little bit of bass in your voice just kind of matters. And, I wouldn't advise you, making a sales pitch with that kind of language necessarily, but there is something about football that just makes it a little bit different kind of live. And what Orgeron did, I think, does allow him to stand out in full contrast against Nick Saban. And what Kirby Smart did on Saturday also, I think, strikes a very nice contrast with someone else on Saturday who just by comparison looks a whole lot weaker than what Kirby Smart does. When Smart says what he says and kind of comes across and gets the laughs, there's no doubt that he kind of looks like the guy in charge of the room right here, the toughest dude in the SEC East. So listen to what you just heard Kirby Smart say and compare that to, talk about beta, the very weak and frankly desperate version of Dan Mullen, who after his team had beaten Missouri on Saturday, knowing he was going to tune in and be a spectator watching Georgia against Auburn, think about what you just heard Kirby Smart say and compare that to what you heard Dan Mullen have to say on Saturday. The contrast here, I believe, is pretty stark. Here's Mullen.
There's a big game coming up next on CBS, Georgia at Auburn. Maybe your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, War Eagle. I don't think anybody ever think I'd say that one, but we got, hey, we're still alive for the to get to the SEC championship game. So, we need some help. We took care of our business today, and hopefully some people can help us out in the West.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that's a guy that allegedly makes millions of dollars, and he's left to say War Eagle on television? What's he going to paint his face? I mean, he's going to get one of those big foam fingers and pom-pom shaker. And, I mean, Dan Mullen, this guy that Florida fans would have you believe is the best X's and O's coach in football. What was it the ESPN guy said the other day? The top offensive play calling mind in the sport? Well, competing against Kirby Smart has reduced him to being a fan just like anybody else. Forced to sit and watch a game on television and War Eagle and, all of those cheers. I mean, by comparison, what Kirby Smart said, the HBTFD is no doubt kind of alphaing Dan Mullen off the stage, and Mullen's left to watch the game on television. So, listen, football's a tough business. Football is an aggressive sport, and sometimes aggressive people use aggressive language, and that's what Kirby Smart did here. And while that's not the language I use in life, that's not the language I use with my family, that's not the language I use in business. In the sport of football, there's no doubt that Kirby getting a chance to flex the way that he did in comparison to Dan Mullen, who was sort of forced to cheer for one of his, what you would think of as a rival. There's no doubt the comparison here. The more muscular-looking coach in this instance is Smart, and the weaker vessel here comes across as Dan Mullen. That's a pretty stark comparison, much the same way it was with Orgeron and Saban a week ago. But there is something else about what happened on Saturday I think we got to point out here. And one of the reasons why I'm wearing the Own the East t-shirt here today is because I think that even if Smart kind of strategically downplays winning the division, there is something really, really cool about it. I mean, I'm a student of history, even recent history. The fact of the matter is, for the entirety that Georgia's been competing in the 12, now 14-team SEC, since we've had divisions here in this league, Georgia's not won the division 3 straight years. A couple other programs have. Georgia joined that group on Saturday. I think that's a really important thing. However, something else about the clip that you just heard from Kirby Smart a moment ago, I think also comes in here. Because I know Connor Riley wrote a pretty good piece about Kirby's decision to downplay winning the East, and I think there's something to that, and we'll kind of get into that throughout the rest of the week. But more so, I think there's also the fact that Kirby Smart wanted to celebrate on Saturday for things having to do with, for issues other than just postseason implications. This for him was not just about punching a ticket to Atlanta and being on the road to Atlanta and everything that might come with that. I think Kirby Smart being historian, that's probably an exaggeration, but someone, because he's an alumnus of Georgia who's aware of the history of the program, that's probably the better overall way to say that. I think Smart also kind of gets a sense and appreciation for just beating Auburn in and of itself being kind of a worthy goal, and Smart also talked about a little bit of that on Saturday too. Here's Kirby again.
Oh, there's always significance, yeah. I mean, there's significance to coming here and beating a ranked team at their place in an unbelievable environment. There's a lot of significance to that and the East. But we're worried about Texas A&M.
So listen, he kept pivoting back to we're worried about Texas A&M, and as a coach, he had to do that. I can tell you on Saturday, as someone who was at Jordan-Hare Stadium and on the field after the game for our Pella Window post-game show, Texas A&M on Saturday for me was the farthest thing from my mind. And getting a chance to stand right there at the mouth of the tunnel where the Georgia locker room was and watching all those players kind of run past me to go into their own locker room to have their own private celebration after spending some time celebrating with fans, it was pretty obvious that Texas A&M was the last thing on their mind there as well. You know, for me, it was a flood of things on Saturday. I think for every Georgia fan, much the same way. Besting Florida, winning the SEC East again, that was a really cool thing. Potentially taking another step towards possibly returning to the college football playoff, that was also a really cool thing there as well. But Georgia-Auburn is a rivalry that matters, and it matters for reasons beyond just the postseason implications and kind of all the stuff going on there. So in that first clip you heard from Kirby Smart, where he said the phrase that every Georgia fan will remember forever, I think a lot of that had to do with knowing who it was on the other sideline, knowing the soil that Smart had been standing on all night long. Jordan-Hare Stadium, it had been a house of horrors for Georgia in the past, at least partially, including the last time Georgia had been there under Smart. But that wasn't the case on Saturday. Georgia vanquished one of its rivals again. Kirby Smart's getting pretty dadgum good at that, beating the rivals that Georgia fans care about most, besting the coaches that Georgia fans like to dislike the most. That's becoming a big part of Kirby Smart's coaching pedigree, and taking a moment to boast and kind of wink with his post-game comments, I think Kirby Smart earned that right. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by our friends at Georgia United Credit Union, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast wherever you find them on all the various podcast players and the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really glad to have you with us. And by the way, as you start thinking about SEC Championship in Atlanta and a big shopping weekend, of course, one of the great ways to do your holiday shopping here this year, when you get ready to pay for those items, flash that Georgia Bulldogs debit card from our friends at Georgia United Credit Union. Everywhere you show it, everyone you show it to is going to know this is a dog fan loving life right now as the Dogs are in the thick of the playoff race. And by the way, speaking of Georgia United Credit Union, they'll give you 3 different design options to choose from when you open your free Georgia United checking account, which also includes options to earn interest. Now, Georgia United Credit Union is so much more than a bank. They've got 19 branch locations throughout the metro Atlanta area, providing access to 100,000 surcharge-free ATMs. Also enhanced security features, convenient access to your money through online banking. So membership is easy. You can find out for yourself and choose your design option for your Georgia Bulldogs debit card when you go to gucu.org/GoDogs. That website, once again, gucu.org/GoDogs. All right, good to have you with us on the program today. We'll get John Stinchcomb here in a moment, and we'll talk to John about some of the more serious aspects of Saturday's game, how the defense performed, how the offense performed, and kind of everything else in between. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here for a moment, and let me say this about Auburn. Auburn is unquestionably a great defense. And I think despite the fact the Tigers have lost 3 games, Auburn is probably still a good team. However, Auburn is becoming a mediocre program, and worse than that, kind of showed itself on Saturday to be what I believe a little bit of a second-rate institution. Let me give you a couple of examples why. First of all, there was the way in which video replays were shown in the stadium on Saturday, which to my eyes, now listen, during the press box, I really couldn't see the big video board too well, so it was hard for me to tell exactly what they were putting on the screen anytime because of the way that my eyes were positioned kind of adjacent to the screen as opposed to being able to look right at it. But when I was on the field for the final moments of the game and the Seth Williams non-catch happened that Gus Malzahn and others thought was supposed to be a catch, you know, I thought the replay official, or I should say the replay people running that video board there, did a really interesting job of kind of creating doubt among Auburn fans what the call was going to be, as opposed to showing the full context of the catch, which I think makes the overturn on the part of the replay officials a little bit easier to understand. And frankly, while that may be a good way to get the fans kind of stirred up into a frenzy, I think it runs the risk of making the Auburn coaches and players look pretty bad after the game. There was a lot of pouting and whining about what Auburn thought should have happened from an officiating standpoint. I think you blame some of the in-house stuff going on at Jordan-Hare Stadium for why the players and coaches end up looking so bad. Someone who was, I think, less than his best post-game was Marlin Davidson, who is a very good player, but AL.com captured a quote from him post-game I want to read to you. This isn't a good look for Auburn. He says, I felt like the refs were against us. Boy, that's not winner talk right there, is it? He says, I can't lie about that. It hurts because I feel like some of the calls should have went the other way, for sure. They were getting more calls than we got, but I can't speak on the refs. That's their decision to make. But it just hurts when you see games being taken away by refs. Boy, bad look for Davidson here. He says you have to beat the refs and the team. That's very hard to do, no matter what team you are. That's Marlin Davidson. And frankly, I think those words from Davidson, as kind of sour and kind of sort of unprofessional as they are, I think that's a reflection of some of the behavior we're seeing from Dan Mullen and some of the, Gus Malzahn, boy, easy mistake to make. Some of the stuff you were seeing from Gus Malzahn post-game on some of that kind of stuff there as well. Just not a good look from Auburn post-game, and I think Marlin Davidson is a perfect example of that. And I think you blame some of the ways in which the replays are being shown on the stadium video board for why some of the Auburn players are behaving the way they are. Obviously there are things that could have been called. The face mask, I won't argue against that too much. But the onside kick, that's a rule. The overturn deal, watch the full Seth Williams non-catch in context. I think it's all maybe a little bit easier to understand. But beyond that, let me make one more quick point here. I don't have any video to show you of this because I didn't capture it, but I certainly heard plenty of people talking about it. There was the video shown over and over again on Saturday, allegedly, and I've seen this on enough message boards to believe it must be true, of Aaron Murray getting a cheap shot late hit from, what's his name, going back to the 2010 game. And listen, my take on this is going to be actually a little bit different than you might think it is, because some people are going to say, how come you're going to show what is essentially an illegal play to incite fans in this game right now? That seems kind of low rent and cheap. But beyond that, let me just say it this way. What's the one knock that you constantly hear from non-Georgia fans to UGA fans? Like, what's the one thing that you hear over and over again? Oh, well, these Georgia fans live in the past. These Georgia fans are dreaming of a national championship that was now 39 years ago. I mean, let's be honest. Friends can be honest with each other. We know that people say that about Georgia all the time, right? We know that. Are you familiar with the internet phrase, the meme that's out there about how life comes at you fast? Isn't it kind of funny that some of these same fan bases that kind of mock Georgia fans for living in the past, how deep into the past they're having to reach for a moment worth bragging about? There was the lead up to the Georgia-Florida game here this year where Urban Meyer was bragging about calling those timeouts against Georgia back in 2008. It was 10 years ago. That's what Florida does to get excited for a Georgia-Florida game now. Reach back 10 years ago for something. The Aaron Murray hit that was shown on the video board at Auburn over and over again on Saturday, you realize that was 2010? I'm right about that, right? That's 2010, right? I mean, we're in the last year of a decade now. That was the first year of the decade. That's how far Auburn's having to reach back for a video clip that can kind of talk trash against Georgia. Boy, it's kind of funny about some of the rival fan bases that used to mock Georgia for living in the past, how far into the past they're having to go to find something to make Georgia look bad. Boy, it is an interesting time for the Dogs when it comes to a lot of these rivals. Hey, before I get John Stinchcomb, let me also quickly tell you about my friends at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa. You know how I feel about this place. It is a beautiful, beautiful getaway in the North Georgia mountains, kind of a short drive from here, and this time of year it could not be more beautiful. Whether it be the late fall and some of the leaves, or as you head towards winter in the month of December, Christmas decorations all over the place, fires in the fireplaces. I had one in my room the last time I was there. This is a really world-class mountain resort, and you can be there right now in honor of Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa's 25th anniversary. You can also save 25% off select dates this month and in the month of December, but you got to act quickly to take advantage of this. The promo code is BVR25. That's BVR25. Go to BrasstownValley.com. You can get a lot of information on that. All right, I have got a special look ahead to Saturday's game for Georgia later on the program, why it's maybe more special than you even realize. We will do that coming up. But for now, on more of Georgia versus Auburn, the big win for the Dogs to help clinch the division, let's talk to our buddy John Stinchcomb right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, we'll say hello to John Stinchcomb here. What is a very happy day around DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. And, John, before we're done, and I apologize for keeping you waiting, but before we're done, I want to get into some of the more serious aspects of Saturday's game, what we still haven't seen yet from the Georgia offense, kind of, maybe the way the defense is kind of holding all this together. We'll get into some of the more serious aspects of this in a moment. But before that, though, as a guy who was a part of the first UGA team to win an SEC East, what does it mean to you to see Georgia now win the division for 3 consecutive years? What does it mean to you to see Georgia beat Auburn for what I believe is the 12th time in 15 tries? Complete dominance here in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. As a alumnus, stakeholder in the program now, what is the state of affairs for you after Saturday?
That's a big deal. I mean, that is a big deal. 3 times in a row, SEC East champs representing our side of the best conference in football. I just think it's a testament to Coach Smart and that program and the health of it all. I mean, that the fact that we have such bragging rights over Auburn right now, and I'm listening to you say they're referencing things that are 10 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be happy to be a Dog right now. It's a great era to be a Dog fan.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'll add to this, John. You've been with me, whether it be for Marlo's matchup shows or anything else. You know how much I love talking about playoff races and the chance to win a national championship. I'm really into all that. But I don't want to let the Final Four, the biggest prize in the sport, obscure from other things that matter. Rivalry games still matter to me. And I was happy on Saturday. I'm speaking as a fan here for a moment. I was happy on Saturday for things that had nothing to do with the college football playoff. And frankly, nothing to do with, even though I've got the Own the East t-shirt on today, frankly, things that had nothing to do with the SEC East. I just think beating Auburn's fun for reasons that have nothing to do with anything beyond other than I remember as a kid when this is as much as a Georgia fan could dream about. And to see Georgia doing that in Jordan-Hare Stadium, that for me is fun all by itself.
I'm with you, man. I've lived through it, and I think I'm probably surrounded by more Auburn fans than any other of our rivals. So anytime you get those bragging rights and you can shut them down yet again for another year, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a healthy rivalry. I've got a lot of respect for them. But, when you win and you've won consistently, man, it feels good.
Yeah, it does. Let's get serious here for a moment, though, and kind of drill down on some of the more, technical aspects of the game. The offensive story is this. Georgia really founded on 3 drives. Obviously, the explosive play to Dominic Blaylock, which is something we've all been wanting to see, and a couple really nice converted opportunities inside the red zone. And then beyond that, and this is not an exaggeration, there was really no offense to speak of whatsoever. This was a game where Georgia went all in a couple times and got the points that it needed and really didn't do anything else on any drive the rest of the game. I believe it's a total of 9 threes and out. I mean, this was a kind of feast or famine type day for Georgia offensively. John, putting my analyst hat on here for a moment, I'm going to choose to evaluate this as, hey, this Georgia offense hasn't been great all year. We kind of know what it is by this point in time. They were on the road, hostile environment, really good defense. This is about as much that could be expected right now, and we'll see if the results get better against maybe, say, lesser defenses, which I believe LSU is, if those 2 teams end up playing in the SEC championship. So that's kind of my overall take on this, but admittedly, it is eye-opening to see this late in the year the Georgia offense, the die has just kind of been cast about what it is. You and I have had very candid conversations on this in the past. When we were at Marlo's at Brookhaven last Thursday, a lot of people had some very pointed questions for you about what you're seeing on this. I mean, after another day on Saturday where it was enough offense to win, and that's the headline, full stop, but then beyond that, but it's still not that much offense. What do you make of this scenario, kind of looking at it from, the 360-degree point of view?
Well, I sent it to a picture to you at the end of last week, and it's from DJ Shockley's Instagram post, and he's visiting Texas Tech, and on the wall it says, "We are what we put on tape." And I think that statement holds true for what you've seen on tape is they show flashes at times, both in the run game and the pass game of what could be, but it's not consistent. And I think there's an identity to Georgia which wins games, but it also gives you a little bit of pause because our offense is, as many playmakers as you see and the offensive line that you have. I think there's got to be some level of consternation of why are we not able to be more productive. Now, with that said, you just won the SEC East. You've only lost one game, and that's because you had 4 turnovers. And this is a college football playoff caliber team that's got a chance to be one of the Final Four. So with all the frustration and the concern, they still put it together, and this is a great season. But, Lee, how many 3-and-outs were there? 9?
I think it was 9, yeah.
Only convert 3 games. It just seems like there's so many playmakers out there. You've got arguably the best running back in college football. And, he averaged over 5 yards a carry. He's probably close to 6 yards a carry. And yet still, it's like there's something left to be desired with this offense. And, I don't really have my finger on it, but at this point, I don't expect some miraculous change of heart that things start clicking. You're too deep in the season. They have an identity. We're going to protect the ball. We're going to rely on a dominant defense and not turn the ball over and control the clock. And let's give some credit to Auburn here, because that front 4 is something fierce, and that defense overall is a very respectable group, and they had a heck of a game. I mean, it's 2 yards allowed in the fourth quarter when the game was on the line. I mean, they put their team in a position to have a chance in what otherwise looked like it was going to be a runaway. So, if there's reason for concern, and I think perspective is huge here, reason for concern as to why there might be a limitation on the national championship race, it's because the offense still doesn't seem to click.
Well, let me try to put at least a little bit of a positive spin on this. You can tell me if this is fair or not. While the offensive results on Saturday clearly left something to be desired, I think there is a case to be made that the rest of the season, it's going to at least be a little bit easier than it was on Saturday. Even if Auburn's not quite the best defense in the country, and say a team like Ohio State might be, who Georgia might face in the college football playoff, at the very least, that game's going to take place on a neutral side. This was top-flight defense. You can watch some of the video stuff that, say, Cole Kublik has put out. Derek Brown is a load to deal with. I had a chance to observe some NFL scouts watching this game on Saturday. They were raving with the Auburn secondary. Obviously they're playmakers at all 3 phases of this Auburn defense. Playing it in its own stadium at least is a mitigating factor here. Georgia offensively could have still been better, but playing a good team on the road I think is kind of something to consider here. A&M on Saturdays at home. SEC championship is in a stadium that Georgia knows pretty well, a venue where it's won an SEC championship before, and then neutral site stuff the rest of the way. So I don't want to put too much lipstick on what might be a pig, but nonetheless, can't you make at least a little bit of a case that the rest of the season at least gets, for either because it'll be a lesser defense or because it's a different venue, there's a chance it at least gets a little easier from here, right?
Yeah, no question. And Auburn has, in my opinion, that the front 4 and quality depth behind it, and linebackers and secondary, but that front 4 is special. We haven't seen many guys with as much talent as Marlin and Derek in recent history play beside one another. So I think our offensive line did a pretty admirable job against those guys, and they both had their moments, but you expect that when you're playing elite players. I thought they performed better up front than anticipated from me against them. I think you look at Auburn's defense, and they're good, man. They are a good team, and it was going to be a battle. You're not going to dominate those guys, and that's fair to say. With that said, our offense performance still leaves a little bit to be desired, and that's with all due respect and credit going towards Auburn. And you look at the rest of the regular season, and there are a few teams either before or after that have the talent on that defensive side of the ball that Auburn did in the way they play. So, yes, things look up. Even in the SEC championship game against LSU, I do think that Auburn is probably playing a little bit more solid than LSU, and they've got better talent, especially up front, than LSU. But they play a different style football, and it's going to be an interesting game. I can't wait for it, but I guess I'm going to have to because we've got a couple more before we get there.
That's exactly right. As Kirby reminded many times on Saturday, still Texas A&M to come. I want to ask about the Georgia defense here in a moment. Before that, let me also remind folks about Kroger as we get ready for the holiday season. That means planning meals, and unfortunately, planning meals takes a lot of time. Kroger can help give you some of that time back. They can give you a great, high-quality, delicious holiday meal without a lot of heat and prep time by you. When you utilize the Kroger chef, here are the choices. You get ham or turkey, all the sides. I'm talking about stuffing, rolls, casserole, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, a whole bunch more. It's a great deal. It's just $70. And you can order a lot of different ways. The Kroger app, online at Kroger.com, or you can just stop by and talk to somebody there at the Kroger Deli. But if you want to get this by Thanksgiving, you're going to order by November the 25th. So we're coming up on that date. So make sure you take care of that to have your holiday meal ready to go by Thanksgiving time, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. All right, John, let me ask you a question. And it may be a little tough to answer this on the basis of watching the game on television, but Auburn does come back a little bit in this game. For the most part, I kind of write this off as, hey, I didn't expect Auburn to just lay down and die for the full 60. I thought they'd show a little fight before the game was over, and for the most part, the Tigers should be given credit for doing that. However, there's a little bit of a contrast between Kirby Smart, who says, no, we weren't doing anything different defensively. This was Gus Malzahn just finding some success, compared to maybe some of the fans who watched it on TV and say, no, that's not true. I saw you go into a zone. I saw you get a little bit, I'm going to use air quotes for this, soft in comparison to the way that you've been playing a little earlier in the game, maybe not trying to give up a big play. Where do you kind of come down on this? Was this a good defense against a guy in Gus Malzahn who just kind of found something that worked late? Do you think that Georgia kind of took its foot off the gas, so to speak, defensively in the fourth quarter? What do you think happened there?
Well, I'm going to reserve the right to review the film, which I haven't yet. But I do think that one series where they scored their first touchdown, it definitely appeared like there was 2 or 3 plays where it was much more of a softer zone rather than the man coverage, and there was a distinct difference. I think every fan saw that. Now, whether that's the plays that were called, I don't know. But yes, there was a difference, and it was evident. I mean, that series alone, and then at that point, Auburn on their own turf with their own fan base, who had been pretty much disengaged for the past half of football, at least 2 quarters worth. They're back in it, and you have an inspired offense based on one series, and they felt like they had some life. And quite honestly, I'm still at a loss as to that onside kick. I mean, I've never heard that rule. You block before 10 yards. That was a new one to me. So it became a little bit of a scramble late in the game.
So let me defend the onside kick thing here for a moment, because I understand where you're coming from on this. If you watch like NFL games on a typical Saturday, most of the college football games on a typical Saturday, for the most part, the onside kick is just, it's gone from the sport, right? Because you can't line up an imbalanced line anymore. I mean, one of the ways in which the overemphasis, or I guess added emphasis, better way to say that, the added emphasis on player safety, one of the ways which I think that's changed the game more than anything else is the way that NFL teams just don't convert onside kicks anymore. I mean, it almost never happens. College teams just don't really convert onside kicks anymore. So while I'm not really a stickler for the rules, that to me is the least interesting part of the sport, it is not a surprise for me to see an onside kick taken away by a rule, because, across the country on Saturdays, certainly the NFL on Sundays, the way in which you used to kind of put everybody on one side, go have a big collision and see who came up with the football, for the most part now, that aspect of the game has almost been completely eliminated.
Yeah, I don't know how you onside kick the ball. I really don't, because quite honestly, it looked like a well-executed onside kick.
Yeah.
It looked like it was placed well, and they, everybody blocks. You usually send blockers out in front. Now, again, you can't overload like you used to, and that makes sense. But the call on the field was Auburn's receiver, Schwartz, I believe it was blocking before the ball made it 10 yards.
Yeah.
So I don't know a scenario, and then you can engage in a block where, trust me, I am grateful it turned out the way it did, although it was backed up by a 3-and-out by Georgia's offense, so it wasn't that much more time off the clock, including 2 incomplete passes. But with that said, it's an interesting deal. I mean, if we were in that scenario, if Georgia's in that scenario, and we need an onside kick, I don't know how you can get the ball back anymore. They've legislated it to the point where there's not a whole lot of options left.
No, I think you're right about that. And it's, John, obviously great to get your insight on the game as Georgia takes a step forward towards being back in the SEC championship game, but a big one looming on Saturday against Texas A&M that certainly has plenty of playoff implications. We'll talk about that on our Marlowe's matchup coming up this Thursday at 6 p.m. By the way, given the fact that Georgia will now play a 13th game, there's a very good chance there'll be another Marlowe's broadcast on the horizon here as well. So, John, thank you so much for being with us here today. DawgNation Daily presented by Georgia United Credit Union. Hope you have a terrific week. We appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Absolutely. You know what? At the end of the day, BA, it was a huge win against Auburn, a bitter rival, and Georgia just clinched yet another SEC East championship. So, it's a great day to be a dog.
Boy, I think that's well said, John. Thank you so much for your time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so I get the point that John's making all the way around there when it comes to the onside kick, that if you're a team that wants one, that needs one, it's pretty depressing and frankly kind of irritating to have the rules so, I don't know, I guess legalistic when it comes to what an onside kick looks like now. But I'll make this comparison. If you're a team that's put your hopes on winning a game on an onside kick, that's a little bit like putting your retirement hopes on winning the lottery, right? I mean, onside kicks have just been legislated out of the game now. So I don't know what to tell you. If that's all you've got left in terms of your strategy for winning, then you've dug yourself a pretty big hole. And ultimately, I think that's what it kind of comes down to for Auburn on Saturday. It's DawgNation Daily. It's presented by Georgia United Credit Union. We're going to talk more Georgia coming up. But for now, let's go around the SEC or cruise around the SEC as part of our SEC Through. Brought to you by our friends at Royal Caribbean. And boy, I'm talking about one of the most beautiful ships in their fleet. A gorgeous amplified ship, Oasis of the Seas. It's all new. It's going to debut later on this month. It's the biggest amplification yet from the fleet there at Royal Caribbean. A lot of amazing things added here to Oasis of the Seas. Ultimate Abyss, which is the tallest water slide at sea, which is like an amazing, fun experience. Great entertainment options like Playmaker, Sports Bar, and Arcade. And you can just sit there and watch all the big games while you're at sea, kind of floating around the ocean. I mean, it's an amazing experience. Playmaker, Sports Bar, and Arcade's amazing. Music hall for like all the live music and stuff. Just an incredible experience. The Lime and Coconut's a really cool bar there as well. And Bionic Bar, and you really got to go and see this. If you go to Royal Caribbean, you can see this for yourself, RoyalCaribbean.com. Bionic Bar is like this robotic bar where, like, you know, the drinks are kind of like made and served by these robotic arms. It's really fun stuff. RoyalCaribbean.com to kind of see more about Oasis of the Seas and get in touch with a travel advisor and book the vacation that I know that you need. All right, let's do a couple stories here. Tua Tagovailoa, obviously a devastating injury for him on Saturday. And listen, college football is about rivalries and, you know, teams you like, teams you don't, but you don't wish, obviously, what happened to him on anyone. And Tua legitimately seems like a really good guy, and certainly he has had a great sort of dignity with the way that he's handled this injury setback here now. We obviously have prayers going out to him for that. No one disagrees with that. However, the part where there is going to be some disagreement, the part where there's going to be a lot of debate, is the handling of this by Nick Saban. Now, ultimately, I have a real problem with the way that Saban behaved after the injury, seemingly trying to push responsibility for this onto his family or you know, other voices, really, you know, kind of making it be someone else's decision that ultimately Tagovailoa was in the game. You make $8 million a year. If you're the coach, you have to own the decision one way or another. Tua is either healthy or he's not. If he's healthy, he plays. That's obviously the assumption you would have about any player in any situation like that. I think some of the media criticism of the Tua injury, the fact that the hip injury occurs the week after an ankle injury, or several weeks after an ankle injury, it kind of been a big storyline. I think that's connecting dots that are not potentially there. And I think the media gets it wrong when it comes to injuries all the time. The media is just constantly fooled by randomness. There are random things that happen, and the media is constantly trying to find meaning for things that might be random. I'm not a doctor. I'll be interested to hear how doctors weigh in on this, but this wouldn't be the first time that the media at large has looked at a random set of occurrences and decided that there was some sort of narrative to be attached to that. However, beyond that, how you feel about this, I think, determines how you want college football to look in the future. If you're an NBA fan, or if you're even aware of the NBA, you know that, quote, load management is a thing where veteran players, and in some cases younger players, don't play on back-to-back nights because they want to rest. They don't want to get injured, so they make up an injury and just come up with some sort of reason when they're not playing, but ultimately it's load management. It's a guy who says, I don't feel like playing tonight, so I'm not going to. One of the things that makes college football so great as a sport is that kind of stuff doesn't exist in the sport. The regular season matters. The games themselves matter. The idea that the Mississippi State game is a game that Tua shouldn't have even been playing in is, I think, pushing the sport to a direction that you don't want it to go. And it's not the fault of the playoff that this happened, because, frankly, people have been running up scores on teams well before we had a playoff or a BCS or anything like that. I, for one, don't want to usher in the era of load management into college football, so I'm not going to criticize Tua Tagovailoa for being in a game that Alabama was winning 35-7 near the end of the first half. And while I don't like Saban, I'm not going to be a part of the pile-on for him on this. Didn't like his behavior in terms of explaining away the incident, but in terms of Tua Tagovailoa playing, I think that's a very defensible decision. I do. A couple other things here real quick. And, I'm kind of a blowhard at times. I obviously give you a lot of hot takes, and I'm never shy about telling you the way that I think. Hopefully, I'm going to be right a few times. You can think of some examples where I have been. For instance, I told you before the start of the season that Dan Mullen and Florida weren't really ready to compete with Georgia. As it turns out, I was right. Georgia dominated that game a couple of weeks ago. Georgia owned the East again for a third straight year. However, here's where I think I need to be at least a little bit fair and balanced. Florida has actually played better in its non-Georgia games than I probably thought it would. Last couple of weeks, I've expected a little bit of a letdown from them against Vanderbilt and against Missouri. Vanderbilt's a team that really kept it close with Florida a couple of years in a row a couple of years ago, and obviously Missouri was riding a 2-game winning streak coming against the Gators on Saturday. And Florida handled both those games easily. So it is fair to say that Dan Mullen has established something at Florida. Now, it's still a wide, degree away from being what Kirby Smart's established at Georgia, but in terms of being this wilting flower that's going to fold up at the end of the season, credit to Florida for not doing that. I think the balance of power in the SEC East is still heavily tilted towards Georgia, but you got to give Florida a little bit of credit for not folding up the tent this year. It pains me to say that, but I'll at least do that. And then one more thing. Already seeing some message board chatter about Auburn fans and their growing dissatisfaction with Gus Malzahn. It feels like we do this each and every year. But keep your eye on this in terms of how this unfolds over the next couple of weeks. There'll obviously be plenty written about it and said about it, especially given the fact the Arkansas job is open again. I've already openly speculated about this. And this, to me, comes down to an issue of Auburn is a good team, but not a great team. Their pecking order third in the SEC West, to me, is somewhat explainable, just given the fact that Alabama and LSU out-recruit Auburn. But third in the SEC West is ultimately not all that bad. I mean, it still makes you one of the top 15 teams in the country. I have very little doubt that's what Auburn is. But sometimes people just get restless. Gus Malzahn gets tired of hearing complaints all the time. Auburn fans get tired of him not kind of breaking through what, at least since 2013, has appeared to be a glass ceiling. They've lost a lot of games in that span. So keep your eye on that for right now and see if that gets a little hotter before it's all said and done. We'll make that your SEC through as we cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. Now, let me turn my attention back to Georgia. And for a moment, I'm sure we'll do more Auburn during the week and the win that was. Let me kind of spin it forward, look ahead to Texas A&M on Saturday. And I've been saying this a lot privately and probably some publicly as well, that Saturday is going to be, and I don't mean to be corny. Y'all, let me apologize for 1 second if it comes across as corny, but going to be a little bit emotional for me on Saturday to watch this group of seniors play its final home game. This has been a special group. I mean, J.R. Reed and kind of every name you want to mention here, these seniors have meant a lot to Georgia. We'll give those guys their due as we head towards the week. But in addition to that, it's also this 2017 class that you better believe has not only been special to UGA, but special here to DawgNation. I mean, remember all the great recruiting coverage we had of those guys coming into the program and the Christmas commitments video and kind of everything else? there were at least a few of those guys from the class of 2017, guys who've been with us for Marlowe's Tavern broadcasts. And, I mean, just so many guys that we've gotten to know well, and you've all, gotten to know as fans and appreciating their Georgia career. Some of them are going to go to the NFL, too, and some of those decisions will be made later on. But there's a very good chance that a lot of big-time fan favorites play their last game at Sanford Stadium on Saturday, standing on the turf at Dooley Field for the last time. In fact, Kirby Smart on Saturday was kind of asked about, he'll talk about the seniors a lot today, I'm sure, when he does his press conference. On Saturday, he was asked about the 2017 class, and Kirby gave the classy answer that you'd expect. Here's Kirby.
That class of 2017 with DeAndre and Jake and all that was, this 3-for-3 in SEC East titles. Like, what has it been like for you watching them grow from, they were that recruiting class of savages, and now they're the foundations of a 3-time SEC East champion team?
Yeah, I'm really proud of them. I'm proud of that whole class. They've done a great job, and we're getting ready for Texas A&M.
So listen, obviously he's going to be asked those questions a lot. Right now he wants to think about Texas A&M, but maybe there's a way we can do both. Can you work with me on something here just for a second? Think about the 2017 guys who mean a lot to you. Think about the current crop of UGA seniors who mean a lot to you. Is there any better gift that DawgNation, I mean the fan base at large, not just our little corner of the internet world here, is there any better gift that DawgNation could give to these seniors and these possible final home game juniors other than making the Texas A&M atmosphere not just the best of the season, but maybe the best of all time at Sanford Stadium, given the fact that Georgia's got a lot to play for against a good team, coming off a big emotional win, making Sanford Stadium an emotional place to be on Saturday, your best for their last? So here's what we're going to do here this week. We're going to talk about a special hashtag best for last. We're going to talk about that a lot this week, a way for dog fans to do something special for the guys playing for the last time at Sanford Stadium, creating an atmosphere that will be remembered forever for a team that very well might be remembered forever. That sounds like a pretty good idea to me. All right, so we'll talk a lot about that coming up in the days to come as we head towards the Aggies on Saturday. Let me also quickly remind you of this. My friends at MyBookie, you got Monday Night Football tonight. You got all kinds of live action going on during the NFL games and obviously the Saturday stuff there as well. So if you've heard me talking about this and you haven't kind of gotten in and gotten involved and made your own bets, it makes the games really more fun to watch. Well, MyBookie Online can also make you a winner before you even place your first bet. So simply just find MyBookie by typing it into your browser. Just type MyBookie into your browser and they'll kind of do the work for you. They'll get you where you need to go. And then after that, use the promo code DawgNation. It's all one word. By the way, it's supposed to be DAWG. When you use the promo code DawgNation with our friends at MyBookie, you get a big first deposit bonus. Up to $1,000, you get your first deposit doubled. That's good stuff there. MyBookie. Use the promo code DawgNation. By the way, Gator Hater Updater, as the Dogs stand on top of the East once again, how about 1,115 days? Take that, Dan Mullen. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Georgia United Credit Union. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews does all that for us. They can take good care of you as well because they show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Story after story. Our friends at R.S. Andrews have been delivering smiles, and they can deliver a smile for you. But you got to check them out online. Go to rsandrews.com. We have, let's say, 20 minutes. I got to do a quick 20, and I've got to get off and get ready for everything else for our broadcast day. But we'll give you a chance to kind of weigh in here. I'll do Facebook first. We'll do YouTube after that, and kind of mix both of them in. Give all of you a chance to kind of weigh in on everything that's kind of going on here. Joseph Kennedy says, beat the Aggies. We can't let up in the fourth quarter, and obviously that'd be a great idea. Sam Hazeltine getting a shout-out here. Thanks, Sam, for being a part of our program here. Lonnie Floyd says we're going to go live when they announce the seniors come out. I don't know if we can stream inside the stadium, but we'll have plenty of video of that we'll be able to show you a little bit later on. David West says, how about them Dogs? No doubt about that, David. Good stuff. Duran Willis says, what a great game to be in Auburn for. Good to see you as well. Excited for this weekend. Go Dogs. Duran, I'm glad you had a good time. It was great to see you there as well, and how much fun that was. I saw so many families there enjoying the action. It was great to be able to see that. That was awesome. Robert Barnes kind of getting behind our hashtag best for last movement here, saying got to be loud and proud on Saturday. I like the idea of that. Ryan Woody Wood says, how about black jerseys for Saturday? I'd make it memorable. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Would not have a problem. Santiago Dion preached the kind words. How about Miriam Martin Corbin, who's normally a ray of sunshine in my life? Miriam, the dark cloud today, saying it's supposed to rain on Saturday. Please tell me it's not going to rain on Saturday. We can't have that. I'm trying to push for the biggest atmosphere in Sanford Stadium history, and I've got rain to contend with. Not only can I not have rain on my parade, literally and figuratively speaking, I can't deal with another week's worth of like post-rain analysis. I just can't do with that. So I don't ask a lot, but please no rain on Saturday. Would that be so much to ask for? Joel Moody already feeling good about forcing Kellen Mond into some mistakes. Hope so. Rob Hicks says, why doesn't UGA run more on the edges? So if you go to the DawgNation YouTube page, Rob, you can watch Kirby Smart's press conference from Saturday, and he addressed that issue head on about why, and he's kind of alluded to this a few times, but he was a lot more specific about it this particular game, about why what the fan sees about the running on the edges, why the coach sees something a little bit different there. And you can kind of, take that for what it is. Different people have different opinions. We addressed this with John Stinchcomb a moment ago about how Kirby's analysis of the fourth quarter defense was a little bit different than some other folks' might have been. But, Smart says that what he sees in terms of a defensive approach to stopping those outside runs from Georgia, a little bit different. Robert Reynolds says, I tried countless times, guys, hear about this Waffle House experience Saturday. It's just not going to happen. So are you talking about us going to Waffle House? Because you better believe we were there. I claimed an Auburn Waffle House on behalf of the great state of Georgia. That's Gus Malzahn's post-game celebration. He likes to go to Waffle House. On Saturday, we took it for Georgia, and that was good to do. John Benton says, how many juniors could leave early? I hope some stick around next year. Yeah, you and me both, John, but that's obviously a big decision facing a lot of folks. William and Elaine Morgan says we need a killer instinct. So for me, I believe that Georgia has a killer instinct. What Georgia does not have is a perfect roster and a perfectly dominant offense to go along with what I believe is a, pretty stellar defense. This is not a perfect Georgia team, but you don't have to be perfect. Here's the thing. You can go back and read the things that I've written. You can go back and listen to the tapes that I've said. I have been as critical as anyone of this Georgia offense, but I'm kind of done with that. I'm just sort of done. I've said my piece. This Georgia offense is not great. Now, go out and win a national championship with what you do have, and it's absolutely possible. That's my full belief on this. No one in life is given a perfect hand, right? You didn't get into an Ivy League school. You didn't come from, rich parents. You weren't blessed with great athleticism. We've all been given less than a perfect hand, and our job in life is to go make the best of it. The football story is the exact same way. Georgia's got a great defense, plenty of talent, and not exactly the world's greatest offense. You know what? No one wants to hear your complaints. Go win a national championship anyway. And this Georgia team may very well just do that, because the idea of a killer instinct, you can't say they didn't have a killer instinct on Saturday. When they finally got close to scoring, they finished it both times. And they put a sort of a big play to go on top of that. And they certainly did everything they could do to limit Auburn when, in a 7-0 game for most of that first half, any offense from Auburn would have changed the tone of the game. 7-0, anything would have changed the tone of the game. And the Georgia defense didn't yield that there. And there are a couple scores there late in the fourth quarter. For me, that's not a big deal. I mean, Auburn was always bound to show a sign of life at some point in time before the game was over. But with Auburn driving the chance to score, you get the big Trayvon Walker sack, right? So I don't think the killer instinct is the problem. Georgia is not just totally perfect in every way. Doesn't have a perfect record, doesn't have a perfect resume. Defense leading the way, offense kind of being dragged along behind. That doesn't mean you can't go out and win a national championship with what you have, because one more slightly philosophical point, then I'm going to take some YouTube comments. Luck obviously exists, and I think some of us have a tendency to believe that luck only shows up in the bad form, the 2012 SEC championship game and whatever other example you want to cite of being doomed by bad luck. But it's possible to have good luck too, right? I mean, the reason why you want to be in the conversation for a national championship is if you can just get close, hey, maybe Lady Luck shines down on you. And, that's obviously not a very good plan to to sort of build your life around. But in terms of what may happen on Saturday, or what may happen on, December, January, and beyond, put yourself in a position to possibly benefit from good luck. I don't think. I mean, I think some of us forget that sometimes, maybe in a big game, maybe a ball in the air lands exactly where it's supposed to go, and all of a sudden, what is not statistically speaking a great Georgia offense, maybe it plays well when it needs to. Devin Glenn says Trayvon Walker's already a legend, LOL. Hey, Devin, don't even joke about this. Kirby Smart said on Saturday he's already one of the best players in the team. You can hear that on the DawgNation YouTube page. You can watch the Kirby Smart deal. And, listen, you can add this to the list of things that I was wrong about. Not that I didn't think Trayvon Walker was going to be great. I've told you many times I believe he's the best NFL prospect on this team right now. That's including a guy who's going to be drafted in the first round in April, Andrew Thomas. I believe that Trayvon Walker may have the highest upside of anybody. But I didn't know if he'd be able to do it as a freshman. I thought that he was maybe a little thin at the end of his high school senior season because he played so many sports, basketball included. And I thought that freshmen that's a tough thing to be in the defensive line in the SEC. Well, that prediction looks foolish now because Trayvon Walker is really turning into a real beast. And it's happening even sooner than it was supposed to. So, yeah, Trayvon Walker is a load to deal with. And he's been this kind of, third down specialist. And, isn't it fun to see all these freshmen on the field for third down? But down the stretch, he may be doing a whole lot more than that. And let me tell you this. Other newcomers, DJ Daniel chasing down Anthony Schwartz, made a great pass breakup on what was one of the few true deep shots that Auburn took on Saturday. Tyreek Stevenson on the field, really starting to feel like he's a part of all of this story. These freshmen are coming on big time, big time. Alco O'Neill says, BA, how are you doing on this wonderful Monday? Well, all you need to know, Alco, is Own the East. Old school T-shirt here today. Don't wear a ton of T-shirts, but old school for me with the Own the East. That's how well I'm doing here today. Green Soldier already kind of talking about Fromm and LeCount and some of these guys. I think it's tough decisions for a lot of them. The easy decision is Thomas. He's almost certainly going. And then when you get to some other names, it's going to be tough. But one way or another, and this week I may not do a ton of speculation about who stays and who goes because I just think we're really early in that process. My only point on this is going to be some of them are not coming back. And likely it's going to be at least somebody that you really wish would change his mind. But, I mean, some fan favorites are going to say goodbye on Saturday. We know the seniors. We can speculate on some of the juniors. But for these guys playing their last, they deserve your best. Hashtag best for last this week. We want to see the best atmosphere in Sanford Stadium history to absolutely make it a house of horrors for Texas A&M and make it a celebratory day for some players who, and this is not an exaggeration, changed the program forever. All right, more of your comments. Devin Glenn says, I'm definitely trolling the Gators later on today. Listen, that's all, all is fair in love and war. GB2 says, I feel like Georgia matches up great with LSU. With our defense and our run game, we can keep the LSU offense in check and on the sideline. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it's a fine matchup for Georgia. Georgia will be an underdog for a reason. LSU's a really good team, but that's a winnable game. Really, I've always felt like any game in the SEC championship is a winnable game. The hard thing for Georgia, given its limitations, is to make it through a full season. A one-game situation, even against an elite opponent, that's not so hard for Georgia. You can do a one-game thing pretty well. It's the challenges of making it through a full year that Georgia kind of has a little bit of trouble with. Speaking of load management, Nicholas King calling for some load management against Georgia Tech. I feel like Kirby's got a little bit of a thing for Tech, so I don't know he's going to be too eager to do that. Spencer Edwards says our offense is kind of broke right now. I don't know what's missing. Yeah, I don't know that question's going to be answered here this year. This kind of is what it is. And for those of you that like other sports, teams win the World Series with a bad bullpen, right? NBA teams win the NBA championship wishing they had just like one more score, right? I mean, everybody's got a collection of talent that's somewhat imperfect. Georgia has got, and it's really, we believe, mostly just the passing game that's probably lagging behind here because, and Kirby said it, even with all the stack boxes, good defensive line, Georgia still ran the ball fairly effectively against Auburn on Saturday, but the limitations that were there were mostly due to the fact that Auburn kind of knew what was coming. So I think it's fair to say Georgia's got great defense. After Kamara's performance on Saturday, you have to say really good special teams. At least you feel that way because you know what Rodrigo's capable of doing. A really good running game, a really good offensive line, and kind of a suspect passing game. I mean, nobody's perfect. And it'd be way easier to win all these games if Georgia was shutting people out and scoring 50 points. I totally realize that. It'd be way easier. But life's just not supposed to be easy. So Georgia's recipe for trying to win a championship. And John's right. And John said this on Thursday at Marlowe's, and it's not what everybody wants to hear. And he said it on our show again today. You are what you put on film. And at this point in time, 10 games into a regular season, Georgia's passing game is just not great. And you can diagnose the reasons, and gosh knows we've done 1,000, examples of that, but it's just not great. But that doesn't mean the team can't be great, even with one area of the team lacking. And when it's the passing game that's struggling, it obviously makes things harder, but it doesn't make it impossible. And Georgia's going to keep plowing ahead and doing what it can do with the profile that it currently has. I'm kind of along for the ride now. That's all I know to say. I have documented the failings and I have pointed out the criticism, but at this point in time, I'm just kind of buckling up and let's see where this goes and see if it miraculously gets better when it matters, because sometimes in sports you see that too. Jim Sexton feeling like the play calling for Georgia's gotten a little predictable. I understand where that comes from. Green Soldier says, good special teams. He says, no, great field goal team and punt team. Have to get better on coordinating some of that. Yeah, so obviously Camarda had a big day on Saturday. Dog life ain't easy, saying Disney dog comebacks are strong with you. That's obviously a reference to, in his viewpoint, being a little too positive. But what do you want me to do? I mean, am I supposed to not enjoy beating Auburn, winning the East? Am I supposed to not be excited about the Texas A&M game, the SEC championship? Predicting an eventual loss for Georgia won't make it any easier for a fan to endure that loss when it happens. And I just think that, look, I think there's something to be said for realizing that certain things are out of your control. You can't control how Georgia's going to play in one of these big moments, and you can't control how teams are going to perform against it. There's nothing wrong with pointing out the fact that Georgia offensively is not very good. But if you couldn't enjoy the win against Auburn on Saturday because you were so mad or upset or felt the need to critique and analyze all the threes and out, I really think you're doing it wrong. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I really think you're doing it wrong. And I understand you value realism and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we're being unrealistic. I'm telling you right now, it's not good. The Georgia offense is not good. The passing offense in particular is not good. But you can still win a national championship without something being perfect. You just can. And so I'm willing to kind of go on the ride and see where it goes. And if it leads to a loss in the SEC championship, if Georgia sputters and falters against Texas A&M, which is possible, if Georgia gets the playoff and then loses, then we will probably end up saying, well, I guess we kind of knew Georgia was heading this way all along. Eventually got undone by an offense that couldn't quite keep pace with the national elite. We may eventually say that. But there's no point in saying that now. I mean, I just don't. I don't have any problem with just sort of buckling my seatbelt and taking this wherever it goes. Rodney Hewitt mentioning Roseme, who had a beautiful catch over the weekend. Also mentioned the possibility of getting Arian Smith, which I would love to do. That kind of speed that Smith brings to the table, and I think Roseme's a big-time playmaker as well. That's going to help with Georgia. Roseme definitely will, and you hope Arian Smith can get involved here. Let us see where else is going on here. Jim Sexton, the subject of the wide receiver rotation. Yeah, I am. I'm right there with you on that. I get the idea that it's a long game and you got to have rotation, and I get the idea that Kirby's also dealing with trying to keep people happy behind the scenes, which is always a challenge. I do realize that. I realize all of that. But it could not be more clear that you've got a handful of guys that seem to produce every time they're thrown to, and some guys that just can't seem to match that level of production. Could not be more obvious. And down the stretch, boy, you can't coach like the Under Armour All-Star game. You gotta have your best on the field as much as possible. I do agree with you on that. Shyman Dog says, if we're all content to beat Auburn, that's like going back to the Rick years. But Shyman, I love your comments, but that comment's not fair. No one is saying, hey, Georgia beat Auburn, therefore it's a great season. No one's saying that. What people are saying is Georgia beat Auburn, therefore it's a great day. Understand the difference? It's not great season because Georgia beat Auburn, but it's a really happy Monday. It was a really happy Saturday night. And the future will be worried about when it arrives. To borrow an old, really, really tired Kirby Smart cliche, I just think that the people who are choosing to be happy today are choosing to be where their feet are. And I know that's a bad coaching cliche, but it is in this instance true. No one's saying, hey, hang a banner for beating Auburn, but wear a T-shirt for one day. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to trust that I can't control the outcome of these future games anyway, nor can I predict them. So, yeah. That's exactly right. And as far as, anyway, let me get some more Facebook comments here for a moment. What else is going on? Deborah Breedlove says, I'm with you, BA. Too many negative comments. Look, and Deborah, let me also say this in fairness to the people who are, and she goes on to say, let's take care of business against A&M, which Georgia very much needs to do. We'll obviously talk a lot about that as we get towards the week. Let me defend the people who are pointing out some of what they view as shortcomings. Let me defend them here for a moment. I do get the, angst on the part of Georgia fans who are so restless because this Georgia team in the last 2 years has been really, really close to winning a national championship. If it could have just held on to that lead against Alabama last year, it would have a really good chance of winning it a year ago. And obviously 2017, you can't get closer than that without actually winning it. So I understand the idea of I'm sort of tired of, enjoying rivalry wins and owning the East and all that. I want to do I want to do the thing that comes next. I do get that, right? I completely understand all of that. However, I'm just the kind of person that I'm still going to enjoy the steps along the way. This is think about DawgNation Daily on a Tuesday in March, on a Wednesday in July. We're so hungry for the season to get here during those times. Well, it is here now. And Georgia just got a really good win, at a stadium that is a tough place to play against an Auburn team that I still think is pretty good. So for today, I'm in a pretty good mood about all that. Wally Foster, yeah, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. First of all, I appreciate the kind words, but you're 100% right that people are on edge because of past woes. I totally get that. This is a complicated fan base because of all that. I do get that. Also, Steve Milton giving the shout out of the day here. Casey Cochran brings a really good point. Well, I kind of criticized some of the Bush League stuff that Auburn did in the stadium on Saturday. Casey apparently was there. There's no doubt they use the sound system really well. They just do. Connor's not here today. If he was here, we'd probably talk about this. And I'm a big believer that the music that gets students the most fired up is not hip-hop music. It's techno music. And I'm not even like an EDM expert or anything like that, not even by a long shot. But Auburn uses a lot of electronic music, what I'm talking about, club music, so to speak. I feel like that really gets the students pumped up. I think it's a good choice. I think that Georgia should use a little bit more EDM type stuff, I don't even know, whatever you want to call it. I do think Auburn uses music well. I really do. I do. Lorenzo Waiter says, keep chopping wood. That obviously includes this Saturday. Good stuff there. Brian Rodriguez says, nothing to celebrate. Need to focus on the next game. Thanks, Coach. Scott Harris says, BA, death, taxes, UGA, SEC East champs. That's exactly right. We first started the Own the East deal. That's what that was about making this a yearly thing. There is power in a program dominating its division each and every year. Making that the first step, an expected step, I just think is a power move for a power program. And I think you're absolutely right about that. Barry Gully kind of upset about some of the projected playoff rankings. Barry, we're going to talk about those a little bit tomorrow. I believe that Georgia absolutely has a strong case to move up. I think that Oklahoma obviously helped itself by coming back to get the road win over Baylor. But when you look at the resumes overall, I don't think there's any doubt here that Georgia arguably has second best resume in college football right now, despite the fact that it has a loss. I think that's absolutely true. Jennifer Caldwell Sperling going for some lunch. Thanks for being a part of the program. Shelton Tucker taking Georgia 41-17. I'm assuming that's over Texas A&M, which would be amazing. Jay Harwell, tired of Gary Danielson. Yeah, I know Danielson got a lot of criticism over the course of the day. By the way, some of that was related to what he said about Chamberlain Smith, the photographer who apparently has been released from the hospital now. So we obviously send well wishes out to her. Sad, scary situation. She's a tough gal apparently, though, because she took a big hit from Brian Harrion. And I've been hit on sidelines before, but like nowhere near the way that she was. It's always jarring just how much it shakes your whole body, even when a player who's slowing down just kind of bumps into you. I can't imagine being hit at full speed by Brian Harrion like that. I can't imagine it. I dare say she's tougher than I am. Matt Rukavina wants to get a point made. Matt, what is your point? I apologize for that. Do it one more time, Matt. Jeremy Lloyd says, what about Jake Camarda, MVP? Yeah, it's a great example of there are a lot of folks, and this is not a see I told you so thing, this is just a fact, that there was a lot of pressure on Kirby to maybe make a punting change at some point in time this season. Kirby stuck with Camarda, and he's really being rewarded for that decision, and Camarda's paying off that loyalty by really coming up big time here. I think that's a pretty impressive thing to be able to see. We always felt like Camarda had a chance to still be a really good punter because it was obvious that he kicked the ball well. Like he kicked it deep very well, which is a matter of kind of controlling some of his kicks. It's one thing if you just don't have the leg to get it there, but he definitely was able to do that. Monty Moon says we talk about the Auburn player shoving Harrion late out of bounds. Yeah, national champion. Rivalry game like that. There's just going to be a lot of stuff on both sides for sure. Brian Coleman on more creative routes for the wide receivers. I honestly don't know why they don't do more of that kind of stuff. Obviously, it seems to work for other teams. That's one of the frustrations I think that Georgia fans legitimately have is the lack of some of that kind of stuff. Keith Finney says we can beat LSU. Our defense is much better. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think Georgia can absolutely do that. I'm about to have to get off the air here, so I apologize. Apparently, Matt Rukavina had something he wanted to talk about. I never did, so I apologize for that. Jeremy Lord on the subject of the way that Camarda impacted field position. Yeah, in that 7-0 game, which most of the first half was, Camarda's ability to flip the field for Georgia, get that field position going, was a really big deal there in that game, for sure. Coffin, thanks for shouting out Chamberlain Smith. We've used her photos here on DawgNation before. She's a good photographer and a tough cookie, no doubt about that. All right, let's get ready to go here. All right, good stuff. Thanks for being a part of the program. Let me also thank the AJC for being a part of it as well. You go to AJC.com, get your Atlanta news now. They will take good care of you and get you everything that you need. They got some great stuff. AJC.com to get Atlanta news now. Follow up on another big Falcons win yesterday. That's kind of surprising. There's also a debate coming up in the in the state of Georgia here, so a lot of politics in Georgia. Now, we don't talk politics on this program, but it's amazing how many huge names from the world of politics are going to be in Georgia the next few days. So lots of stuff there. AJC.com. The Kaepernick thing from the weekend, you can read about that at AJC.com. Just a bunch of stuff going on. Atlanta News Now. Check in throughout the day for AJC.com, Atlanta News Now. Also, R.S. Andrews. Thanks for making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible for us. Chance to talk here every day. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. You get that $99 furnace safety check. Make sure your furnace is ready to go for the cold weather season to come. It is online at rsandrews.com, and every Friday is part of the R.S. Andrews Go with the Flow. So have a great day. I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily presented by Georgia United Credit Union.